point in time, ask the audience what's on their mind. I mean, you've been silent, so why don't you pose some questions and let them be as provocative as they can. Yeah. Who has the first question? Let me walk around with the mic. If nobody, I think I saw somebody's hands being raised. Sameen, was that you? I was joking. Who's asking the first question? Okay. Ritesh, do you want to nominate someone to ask the first question?
The PR's been talked about quite a bit, so might as well get Poonam to ask the first question. She's also been one of the biggest propagators of ensuring a gender-neutral workplace for us.
So it's not really a question, but more of a comment, and I think most of our panelists have also sort of talked about is there's stereotyping and there's reverse stereotyping. And I think the most important thing to do is to recognize that, and to what Dinesh said, I mean, I wish everyone I know a happy Women's Day, and most of the men who I wish don't look back at me and they're like, why? I'm like, you're not happy for the women in your life? And it's just, today what we're doing today is not for the women, not just for the women, it's for all of us. And I, for one, am really appreciative of your time and your comments today, but don't have a question yet.
Thanks, Poonam. Questions?
Okay, so anecdotally, is there anything that stands out? I know Purnima talked about that time about her interview, but anything that really stands out as that pivotal moment when you realize that stereotyping is for real? I mean, as women, and again, I don't want to get into the victim complex, but as women, you sort of grow up with this inherent knowledge, or at least when you're in the workplace, you have this inherent knowledge of stereotyping, but sometimes that?
Okay. So it's true. Well, during the time that I was growing as a professional, right? At a very junior management level, you look up to all sorts of senior leaders, and most of them being men. And one is very confused about your own role model, because the men as your role model need not always be people that you can follow in whole and soul, because they're just wired differently. But I'll tell you one stereotype that I realized for sure. Interactions at workplace between a man and a woman, right? Unfortunately, because of biases, when you see a senior man interact with a junior woman, even if he's mentoring, you have a lot of office gossip, because there is a general understanding that a man and a woman may be interacting not because the man is mentoring the woman, but there's something going on between them. And people love gossiping. And I realized that it's a big barrier for men to actually spend time, or a leader who's a man to spend time with a junior woman to actually mentor or to even give softer feedbacks. And how does this impact a woman? A woman loses out on that time for mentoring or finding sponsors within an organization, because there is no man who wants to take on that, extra issue of a gossip happening maybe. Now, that's not a bias that a man has, but it's a bias that we as a society have. We as a society have as a perception, and we perpetrate that kind of a bias. And the losers in this whole thing is that women lose out on the opportunity of mentoring. We lose out on the opportunity of sponsoring because of the fact that we all have those biases in our mind. We talk about special women's network, which is required, or a special support system in corporates that are required so that women can network. That is required because of this kind of a bias and this kind of a barrier. Because today, without that structure, without that support system for networking, it just is difficult to catch up with your boss over a coffee and find out what more could you do. And your boss would think 2 times over before he calls you over a weekend, whereas he would feel very comfortable going for dinner with his a male counterpart or a junior, right? So those are the biases that I've seen have actually limited women from growing from a junior or a mid-management going up to a senior management in many cases, because that's what actually helps you make the leap to work from a mid-management to a senior management, because you need mentoring, you need networking, and these biases stop you from doing that.
Just ask, let me ask a question to Sukhjit, where, you said almost 50% of your workforce is women, right? And are there mechanisms that you put in place, where what Smriti said is actually addressed proactively? Are there structured ways in which organizations do this? I'll just give this to you.
Yeah,
so that
it's working now. Yeah. Sorry. Well, let me. Definitely, there are biases. As I mentioned earlier, that we've grown in a culture, in a society where even there are biases against men. We all know that even our mother will always say to a boy, a child, that why are you crying? You're a boy, So that definitely so in the way we have been brought up, I think, and it's still there in the culture, But I just want to draw your attention towards two things, and I'll just give you other side of. And I'm glad that as modern workplaces like this, definitely these biases are slowly going away. I'm not saying it's completely gone, but definitely we as leaders and we as colleagues here definitely are trying to do away with these biases over a period of time, and it will go away slowly, one by one. But what I want to touch upon is a very important aspect that I'll just give one example. That a few years back we were discussing that why don't we have about 1,500 pickups and drops happening in cabs, and we had so many drivers. We were wondering with the question, why don't we have a woman driver in cabs? Okay, we have so many male cab drivers. Why don't we have? And we started recruiting, and it was very difficult to get a woman cab driver. And finally, we figured out that even the local authorities, the government authorities or the RTAs were not providing a commercial license to a woman driver, right? So even those kind of things exist in the system today that we can try, and if we deep dive into those things, so there's an intent probably, okay? So it's not about biases only, there's an intent to go that extra mile and do that, but probably the system around has to be also changed by each one of us. It's not just about the workplace, it is about the system that is supporting the workplace around, whether we are going and doing something about that. Similarly, there are various examples about the workplace like airport for us, where there were a very different system for women because there are no women engineers earlier. Now definitely we have a lot of women engineers. So we turned around the airport infrastructure to make it, to enable so that women can start working here, and there are definitely a lot of women engineers who want to come and work with us. Similarly, I want to touch upon one other aspect, which I think was touched upon a little bit, that it is not about always men having biases. And I'm sorry to use this word, even women have biases against women, okay, in the workplace. A woman who has joined a workplace about 20 years back has never seen that flexibility being provided to a woman. It happened in our system. And when she had a problem and she wanted to resign, that woman leader in operational area, we said, no, you can take this flexibility. And she came back to us and said, no, but if I take this flexibility, so many women in my department will ask for the similar flexibility. We said, yes, that has to be the turning point. If you take this flexibility and you can showcase this flexibility to your women colleagues in your office, definitely it will change the workplace. So I think these kind of biases do exist, but I think we as individuals have to overcome this over a period of time, and it is women biases against women also which are, I think, jeopardizing this.
I actually, so like you said, take an example. About a year and a half back, I was, a happy mom, pregnant, but I had to shake these biases again, and I wouldn't name who, within the organization with a woman leader to woman leader, and that woman leader could not even fathom why I'd like to go and, my husband's French, go to France and actually apply for 6 months working there. There's so much bias internally, as Sujit said. She said, well, she wasn't able to do that, so why would it be done for me? Which is something that you have to fight. So I think that I felt conviction that it's important now to tell her that we need to change the ante, exactly what you said, and I was happy to kind of do that and take that all the way up to Europe and actually got that sanction. But we have biases women to women, and I think that's where we need to break. And no matter how coy and how coquettish people think we can be in terms of let's say mindset, I think we also have to be very, very evolved as women to women when we're talking amongst our peers. Let's not have biases amongst us to then create that environment or that ecosystem which has to really, really be cohesive. Versus, and I totally agree, biases are not men and women, they can be any which way. It could be your parents and grandparents and everybody else has put that in you. You need to be a certain way, and that's reflecting at the workplace. And I was recently, that's what I said, that that journey to kind of get that okay, that the 6 months that I'm getting my maternity, I will do it in France because my husband's French. Isn't that so simple? And I think that conversation itself was a turner. So I think that change I'm seeing now, and today that leader and I are very happy and even meet for coffee and discuss that.
Great. No, thank you so much. I think this has been a very, very engaging discussion. I just want to ask one last time if there are more questions, if there are any more questions from the audience. Right. Shruti.
When we talk about equality at the workplace, it's also about an equal pay, right? So when it comes to equal pay, there's a lot of chatter, I'm not sure of this data, that women actually get paid less than men. So is that because there's a bias, or is it because we're not aggressive enough when we negotiate salaries?
I think we are apologetic of being aggressive as women, very clearly. We are really apologetic, and maybe we kind of think, do we really deserve that? Whereas, again, I'm not going by biases, but I think it's time that, and there are some women who are very good at negotiating, and I know that there's that whole bit when you kind of negotiate a salary, and I'm told that, I'm not just told, it's in your face. There's the whole film theater industry which will tell you women actors get less and men actors get more. I can tell you hospitality, women chefs and men chefs are different. A sommelier who is a women sommelier and a men sommelier, I mean this, but I think it's about negotiation, and you hit the point. I mean, this is what really turns the company hiring to say, well, she demands it or he demands it and they deserve it.
I think there are a few different things going here, right? Like, one, I think women are not good at selling themselves, right? When a man comes and tells me that they've done X, I put a little -5 in that. When a woman comes and tells me they know X, I put a +10 on it, because women always undersell themselves. I think second, women don't negotiate because, also women who negotiate are considered as aggressive, right? And there are actually lots of sort of studies around this. That women who negotiate, they come across as aggressive and not likable, right? So women try to avoid negotiating when they're having the sort of pay conversation, which means they end up with lower salaries. And then third, of course, there's the bias, right? Where, men are sort of considered to be, more superior in certain leadership skills and, seniority roles, and they end up demanding higher pay. So it's, I think, more than one factors that's sort of going in there. And it's really something that as a company...
Standing, I think one observation, and I know our turnout, corporate count is much higher, but the turnout is comparatively low. So right now I really feel I wish we had made this event compulsory for everybody. Because this messaging and this sort of discussion is very important, but doesn't really happen in regular, at regular day-to-day work, it doesn't really happen. So I think great opportunity to discuss all these, viewpoints here. Second, I think women managers, I think I have been very, very lucky to have great mentors at this organization, and I look up to them not because they're men, but because they're very empathetic, and also they're very, very